This is a ruby. Or is it? Now, I used to sell these as rubies, and you'll find that across the board, and I think it's perfectly acceptable for people to sell these as rubies, but generally, more in a contemporary sense, I tend to refer to these as pink sapphires. And I'm making this video because I posted this as with a description that said pink sapphire. And if you look quite closely, you'll notice it is discernibly pink, and that's why I call it that. Now, ruby and sapphire belong to the same sort of mineral, right? They belong to the corundums, very hard, notoriously hard materials, and you get sort of sapphires and you get rubies. The distinction generally is sort of chromium, which is what gives it that sort of UV reaction and that notorious red or pink color. Now, in mineral science and gemology, there are somewhat contentious interpretations or different sort of end members of schools of thought as to what constitutes a ruby. Now, I call these pink sapphires largely because I'm a bit of a purist in an etymological sense, largely because the word ruby derives from rubeus, which means red. So when someone refers to this as a pink ruby, they're essentially calling it a pink red. In the same way that someone referring to something as pink amethyst doesn't really make any sense. And I've got videos on this as well if you want to root those out. Because amethyst, if you scratch the surface, technically means purple. In fact, the American Trade Association or the Federal Trade Commission, one of the two, I forget what the organization is called, says that you can't actually sell things that aren't purple as amethyst. That's how baked in purple is to the word amethyst. So etymologically speaking, it's rooted in the word amethystos, which means not drunk, and it basically means purple, right? So calling something pink amethyst is essentially calling something pink purple in the same way that calling this pink ruby is the same as calling something pink red, which of course, I think to anyone, makes absolutely fucking sense. So I refer to these as pink sapphires. However, many people in mineralogy will refer to this as a ruby. However, in gemology, people almost exclusively refer only to red varieties of corundum as a ruby, largely because etymologically speaking, in the strictest sense, it derives from the word red, which means, quite reasonably, that if it's red, it's a ruby. If it's pink, probably not.